5 years ago, December 16th, 2017, what happened?
My phone rings and the voice on the other end says, "Hey, are you so-and-so son?" I said, "Who's calling?" He said, "This is the Phoenix Police Department calling. I'm here to notify you, next of kin, that your father's passed away. And oh, by the way, when we went to pick up the body, there are 3 11-year-old children living at the home. They're triplets. They're your half-siblings, and you're the surviving family member. What would you like to do with the kids?"
Wow. What do you do with that? Carl, we're about to get real here,
Let's go.
Join Charlie Maloof as he explores the personal journeys of Broad River Retail's very own memory makers. Welcome to Stories from the River.
Welcome to the podcast. This is Carl Hillesland, our Director of Retail Performance, arguably the biggest fan of the podcast. Carl, have you listened to every episode?
Every episode, Charlie.
True or false, do you have this on your workout playlist?
I do. It actually is my workout playlist. So if these things stop, I'm stop working out, by the way. But
we got to keep it going.
You got to keep it going. Yep.
All right, Carl, before you joined the River, though you had an illustrious career in furniture and home furnishings. Tell us about you and your career, and thank you for that story from 2017. I want to get into that too.
Sure.
Maybe you can weave that into this story.
Yeah. Well, professionally, my career starts when I graduated college. I was a part-time youth pastor. And so, making the big bucks. And to make ends meet, I filled vending machines in Gary, Indiana. Real great spot there. And I painted homes because we're from Northwest Indiana, born and raised in Valparaiso, Indiana. And so, I hung out with a whole bunch of middle schoolers and high schoolers, modified Nerf guns, that kind of thing. But, the next best thing to owning a boat and a cabin are friends that own a boat and a cabin, right? And so my friend Brandon Yaller is the CEO of Gasho Furniture, an Amish furniture company, case goods, out of Pigeon, Michigan. So tip of the thumb, as Michiganders like to allude to. He had he had an opportunity and he had a need. He had a need for a sales rep, so someone to go around the stores, talk about the product, and help people get inspired to sell. And so started there and we had great success. Art Van was my first account, Art Van Furniture, and met some of the most amazing people in furniture and in retail. And so during that process, I met a guy named Danny McDaniel, and Danny told me that, Carl, your life will be the average of the places you go, the people you meet, and the books that you read. And at that point, the only book that I'd read was like the Bible growing up and, maybe really nothing else, honestly. But I started listening to personal development books because my drive from Valparaiso, Indiana to Detroit, Michigan was 3.5 hours.
Wow.
And so I'd listen to books and I'd go into a store and talk about the book. And I did that for several years in a row. And I think that what ended up happening is it just catapulted my career from a leadership and personal development standpoint. And from there, I had an opportunity to join Ashley Furniture as a GM. And I was given the keys to a brand new 6.0 store. We're on 7.0 store now.
What year was this when you joined Ashley Furniture?
Ashley Furniture, that was probably 2016.
And this was a corporate store?
This is the corporate stores in Chicago.
Okay.
Yep. Maryville, Indiana was part of the Chicago market.
And why did you go from wholesale manufacturer to retail?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that I began to have this thirst for was personal development and personal growth. And I identified an opportunity in me to go take on a challenge that I've never really led a team, unless you consider like middle school kids, to a mission trip to Costa Rica, right? And it was an opportunity to step in to be a coach. And that was something that I just felt like I had a calling on my life to lead. And I stepped in that position. They gave me the keys. And we took that budget from $7 million to $14 million in that first year.
That's awesome.
And the team, it was just amazing. It was an amazing event.
And so how long were you there?
I was with Ashley Corporate for about 3.5 years. And in my time there, we went from one store, my responsibility went from one store and we crushed it there, to the regional trainer, crushed it there, and then became the regional director over multiple stores. And that's where the wheels really started falling off.
Okay. Well, unpack that, pull the layers back there. Or why'd the wheels fall off, or where'd you go from Ashley?
I hit the ceiling. So, and I think it's a natural phenomenon that happens in anybody's life, whether it's personally or professionally. And I essentially, got into a situation where I didn't have the skill to lead through it. So I was a great store manager. And some of the best feedback I got is, Carl, you are a great store manager, but you're not really that great of a multi-unit leader. Mm-hmm. And what I realized is there's a difference between duplicating and scaling. And duplicating is I can take myself from this store and be a GM of this store and get similar results. But how do I take multiple stores and not be in every single one of them and get similar results? Scaling, right?
Yep.
And so I realized I had a deficit in skill.
Okay.
And at that point, I met a guy named Justin Most, and Justin taught me and introduced me to John Maxwell and EOS.
And this was around, 2019, 2020?
It was right in that, probably about 2017, 2018.
And so did another licensee take over the corporate stores and you went to work with them?
That's right. So another licensee came in, bought the Chicago market, and I ended up going and working for them. And what I realized is at that point in my career, I was just burnt out. I was a younger guy, I was just chasing the money. It was good money. Furniture is great money, and there's good stuff there. But I lost sight of who I really was, Charlie.
And so is that why you left?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean by the wheels came off?
Yeah. I mean, it was essentially from a skill set, my business, and my success started plummeting on the professional side. Then personal side, my life was a wreck. I had no internal peace. It was like I needed to step away. It was complete burnout, essentially, is what it was.
And so did you become a full-time John Maxwell trainer, or is this when you went into, I think you went to work for Purple?
Yeah.
So where, take us from leaving Ashley to, and then.
When I left Ashley Furniture, I went through this phase and I was like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, right? Every entrepreneur, I took the entrepreneurial leap and I got connected with EOS, which stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. And essentially what it is it's a business operating system that works in any industry, any company. And because I wasn't good at creating process and creating system, I went and paid out of my own pocket to learn somebody else's process so I could help other people, because I didn't want other leaders to have have unbelievable people work for them and not help them be able to get to that next level to find the gold in them.
Got it.
So I started my own company, and you know what I realized? I'm a better team player than I am a solopreneur.
Okay, so you're doing all these self-assessment and self-realizations, self-actualizations along the way. So EOS, you decided to be a team player, so then you went to Purple after that?
Part of the entrepreneurial leap was working with other companies that were entrepreneurial in spirit and wanted to duplicate and scale. And so I had several companies that I worked with. Purple was one of them. And during this time too, not only was I working on myself with the scaling systems, but we were with John Maxwell learning how to grow ourselves personally and professionally from a leadership standpoint. And all of it came to a head when I saw a LinkedIn post by Scott Patrick of the Director of Retail Performance from Broad River. And at that point, I remembered back to 2017 when the triplets came into my life. And kind of where that ties back in with the river is we have an unbelievable family. And I have a cousin that the triplets are super close with, and they live on the other side of North Carolina. And I contacted Greg Kammer. I said, hey, Greg, I got to get some furniture for my newfound family here, right? My siblings. And they've never had a bedroom set in their life. It's just real, unique situation. And he said, well, let me introduce you to Charlie. And Greg, if you remember, introduced us over email, and you helped me furnish my siblings' first bedroom set they've ever had in their life.
Oh, wow. They live in the Western North Carolina area.
That's right.
So that's how we got connected. That closes the loop on the opening story. So they're living with cousins in Western North Carolina. your half siblings, they're okay. I'm sure you get to visit them at times.
Yeah.
And so now you've decided, you saw this post by Scott Patrick, we're promoting an open position. And then you started 16 months ago as our associate director of retail performance to get you some experience. You hadn't been in a role like that with for us before, and coming back into retail. And so thank you for taking us through your career. I love the personal development, like what you had a gap, you assessed it, and you used this 3.5 hour drive from Valparaiso to Detroit, and then you went into your accounts and talked to them about the books you were listening to. So that's awesome. Before you joined us, though, in July of 2021, you came for a visit, and I think we had a pretty interesting informal interview, if you can even call it that. What can you share about your initial visit to Broad River and about that interview experience?
Well, like any good connector, Charlie, you're a great one. And so we're trying to find some common ground. And you talk about, you had this great story. I'm from Northwest Indiana, so a little bit outside of South Bend, Indiana, where the University of Notre Dame is. Mm-hmm. And you had this great story about how you missed the time zone calculation, because Northwest Indiana is Central Time and, South Bend is Eastern. Sorry to, tell you on that one. But the cool thing is that we started talking about Notre Dame, and I started talking about a football team, and we also had common threads around the Purpose Summit. And I said, well, yeah, do you know Dr. Amber Selking? And you were like, yeah, absolutely. That's actually one of those speakers I wanted to listen to or to meet and to talk with. And I was like, well, she's one of my good friends. And you said, no, she's not. And essentially, like, for the interest of connecting again, you're like, well, if she's such a good friend, why don't you put her on the phone? And we literally did that. We called Dr. Amber Selking in the middle of the interview, and for 10 minutes, the first question out of your mouth, it was amazing. It's like, okay, Amber, tell me about Carl. Who is this guy? And her response, I actually used her response to introduce myself to my entire team when I got here to the river. And here's what she said. She said, Carl is one of the most optimistic, energetic guys you'll ever meet, but it can come off as disingenuous until you get to meet him. And I thought, I was like, wow, that was an awareness thing in that moment that I was receiving feedback as the mental performance coach for the University of Notre Dame football team, is telling my future boss, one of my future bosses, right, that this is who this guy really is. And so I just really appreciated that kind of vulnerability and humility in that moment, because it was really important for me when I'm choosing another company to come to. There was a couple of things I was looking for. An ability to connect with you guys was one of the things that was at the top of the chart.
Yeah, we never really asked you any really tough questions, but we did have you call someone who you said was a good friend, who then was pretty transparent and said, here's the good and the bad. And it may come off as disingenuous, but it's not. So I was like, should we have really asked him some real questions? I don't know, maybe, but it was a memorable experience. That's for
awesome.
Sure.
Yeah.
It was super high energy. In fact, you called her right there on the spot. We had that connection. And the story is true. I missed my first and only, the first quarter of my first and only Notre Dame football game because it switched time zones on me, and we did not anticipate that. We're like, there's no traffic going to the game. Where is everyone? Oh, it's really quiet. Oh, they're all in the game. The game started. Duh. Yep. So can't undo that one. Okay, so then you began with us in July 2021, and it wasn't that long ago. So I'm sure you remember your first day. Yeah. Right. Tell us about your first day, your day one.
Well, I pulled up, and there's a parking spot that was Stacy McCormick had a cone with my name on it, a piece of paper. I don't know if Jesse put that out or something. Shout out to Jesse. She's awesome. So I had my own parking spot right at the front door. So I was like, oh, that feels cool. And I walk in, and there's this day one box. Mm-hmm. And it's signed by a whole bunch of people I have yet to meet that are about to radically change my life. And inside of it is a whole bunch of Broad River swag. Then Stacy brings me to my office where, James had my laptop set up, everything already squared away. Open up the laptop, and the first email is a video message from yourself, from Manny, from Stacy, Tracy Downs, who is our, human capital, Will Luke, and just welcoming me to the river. And this is like days literally after I interviewed, because it was a really quick turnaround.
Quick turn.
And I sat there, I'm like, is this too good to be true? Like, what is happening right now? And from that moment, I walked right into a senior retail leadership RX, which is our monthly meetings. This was a 2-day meeting, a strategic meeting, and where my new team hands me a notebook and a pack of pens, and Stacy McCormick says, note takers are history makers. And literally, that's where I encountered my first Stacyism. The rest is history, and it's been phenomenal. So that set the tone for every single thing, that how I interpreted my experience at Broad River was that day one. It was amazing.
That's awesome. That's a great story. So today, you recently had a promotion from Associate Director to Director of Retail Performance. So what's your primary role? What are you responsible for?
Yeah. So as a Director of Retail Performance, I am responsible for the sales and the retail performance in our 3-state, 32-store with Cobra Kai, our E-team, right? In that 32-store footprint. And so all of our memory makers that are in our stores, representing us and our products, that performance rises and falls on leadership. And I'm at the responsibility intersection right there for all of those.
Love it. And so how many direct reports do you have, and who are your direct reports?
Current state, we have 5 different regions. And so the leaders of those regions I get to work with, I get to be on their team. And those people are, well, we don't have full 5 yet, but is Renee Bradley, Chris Barrier, Chris Wright, Rick Rush, and Chris Levenberg.
Awesome. And so you get to work with them, and you mentioned RX. That's the retail prescription. It's the prescription for how to go win the month. So we do these senior retail leadership meetings, and I'm sure you took great notes that day. I bet you even have your day one.
I absolutely do. I almost brought them.
Oh yeah, we should brought you the day one notes. Okay. So since you've joined us, you know, a lot of people have been talking about this backlog and how long it takes to get furniture. And we've had this initiative called Project Ship, sales order, health, and inventory prioritization, and how the supply chain has really been working on that. So it's been our company's top initiative is to reduce the backlog, increase speed to customer, and it has been shrinking, and the speed to customer has been accelerating. So what has been your experience along those lines with supply chain and Project Ship of the first 16 months with us?
Yeah, you know, we're in a completely different spot now than we were when I got here 16 months ago, right? And so 16 months ago, I mean, our furniture was pushed out 6 months, 8 months. We had customers waiting 12 months, right? And it's not because we didn't want to get them the furniture. It was because it was all Brian Deckelnick's fault.
We've had Brian on here.
Sorry, Brian, totally not true. But our supply chain guy, right? No, but COVID wreaked havoc on the entire global industry. Anyone listening to this knows this. They couldn't get certain things, and heck, we couldn't get toilet paper for the longest time, right? So anyways, but where we're at now, that was, and well, let me take a step back. We're coming through that 16 months. You know, we had to look at a customer in the eye who just got a brand new home, one of their life's best memories, and say, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, thank you so much for choosing us. You know, we're experiencing furniture delays up to 6 months plus, and it's like, you have all this hope in the room, and right,
all the energy,
tens of thousands of dollars, you know, like it's just, and oh man, and so the resiliency that created in our teams, Charlie,
to sell through that,
and to connect despite that adversity, I really believe is the foundation of, one of the variables of the foundation of why we're succeeding so much now. So current state, instead of 12 months or 12 weeks, or it's even down to 12 days in some situations. And sometimes we're getting furniture to our folks or our clients or our guests before they even want it. So, I mean, big shout out to, you know, Brian Deckelnick and his team, Tim Klaus and his team, Tanya Busker. Like we have the most amazing talent, you know, navigating the ships when it comes to those things.
So it's a lot healthier.
Yes.
And it takes a village, and it's not just Brian Deckelnick's fault, but it's everyone's fault for making it better. Yeah. And we have great partners. And so, but I love what you said, how the resiliency that tested us with has really produced a good muscle for us to like improve in lean times and good times. So, you know, last year in 2021, when you joined, we were in the middle of a stimulus-infused, red-hot, record-setting year for us and many others in home furnishings, especially in terms of like retail traffic and customer demand. But things have been And things have definitely cooled this year. How have we been able to thrive this year in spite of things like slowing demand, reduced customer traffic, rising costs from inflation, and other macroeconomic concerns?
I think a lot of this pegs back to what you and Manny, how you guys have led. So what I mean by that is during the pandemic, this was before my time, so these are stories that I've heard, right? Broad River sent out checks to employees that were on furlough before the government even talked about stimulus. The trust that demonstrated, and I think the speed to trust that we'd like to talk about, people trust the company. People trust our leadership. People trust your leadership. And when we have these town halls where we're publicly communicating where we're at, the good, the bad, the ugly, we take ownership because we take ownership over things we do well, the things we don't do well, and the things that other factors or other people do that adversely impact us. We are an ownership first type company. And that to me is one of the things that people see. And now they don't have a doubt about, like they see the news.
Yeah.
But we're so focused on the things that matter most, and we're so dialed in that we know there's plenty of meat left on the bone, despite 20 and 30% below in traffic that's coming in and all of those things.
Well, our sales certainly haven't been in line with the traffic declines. They've actually been up, which has been quite a blessing. But learning from great books like Everybody Matters has been super helpful. And just hey, we say, look, trust is like a crock pot. You have to earn it over time. It takes time, and just watch our decisions and let us prove it to you. You can give trust, but it can certainly be taken away with one bad decision. If you're trying to apply the old Jack Welch, hey, let's cut the bottom 10%, or it's a pandemic, time to cut. Oh, it's a recession, time to cut.
Yeah.
We just don't think about it like that.
And you said a cool thing there too about Everybody Matters, which is a beautiful book by Bob Chapman. And this is something that, really encapsulates us as a culture where everybody really does matter. The intentionality that we don't look at our folks as numbers, but we look at them as investments into their future. I mean, we call our human resource, I know we've talked about this many times on the podcast, but it's human capital because it's something to be appreciated, something to invest into.
Yeah.
And that, again, compounded over time, is not just a word or a phrase on a wall. It's something who we really are.
Yeah, capital is something that you want to grow. It's an investment.
Yeah.
And a resource is a liability that you want to shrink or reduce. It's just a mindset difference.
Absolutely.
It's just saying that it just reminds us that we want to grow our people and see them be successful and have growth-minded people who will challenge us, which will then change us for the better.
That's right.
Grow the company from the inside out. Okay, so that's how we're overcoming the retail traffic and that sort of thing. So what have you been really focused on this year? Yeah,
so we have been focused in on our friend called Mr. Mo. And what Mr. Mo is it's a business operating system. So, early in my career, I got connected through to a company called EOS. And that was essentially, like I was saying, it was a framework that you can take any business in any industry in any economic cycle and condense it down to 6 key components. And to the degree that you can strengthen each one of those key components, that's the degree that you'll be successful. And so what Mr. Mo is the name because we believe that purpose begins with identity. And so we gave an identity to our business operating system, something so dry, right? Something that can be dry, and instead of calling it the Broad River Way or whatever, we humanized it. And more often Mr. Mo, I just had it.
Well, that's it. It's an acronym.
Yeah, that's right.
More right. More often.
That's right.
Mr. Mo.
Mr. Mo. Mr. Mo. Yep.
We need a mascot for that.
Yeah.
We need Kim, marketing, Jim.
Yes.
There's a mascot for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Okay. So, and it's a mindset and mental positioning, which you talked about. So you've been working on the mental framework and the business operating framework for EOS that you've learned and installed that into the business and to be entrepreneurial within a company, right?
Yeah.
I've heard you talk about that. And then to do more right, more often within that construct. Okay. And so, let's elevate the branding and take it to Mr. Mo for 2023. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about leadership. I know you talked about your leadership training with the John Maxwell group, and what can you share about that experience and how it has really influenced your leadership style or understanding of leadership?
Yeah, I remember going, if you get connected with the John Maxwell group, you'll go to a certification. And so my wife and I actually did this together. We'd come off of a hard season and we were looking for growth. And that hard season, the other part of our story is before the triplets were part of our life, all we wanted to do was be a mom and a dad. Like that was a big, significant thing. And we had experienced 3 pregnancy losses. And we're coming out of this season where it was really hard for us. And we looked at each other and we said, hey, we want to grow through this thing. We want to go through this everything. We want to do it together. So we actually signed up both, got certified for John Maxwell, went to Orlando, and all the content. The thing I love about John Maxwell is that he writes at a 4th grade level, which is perfect because I don't like being the smartest one in the room, and the content's great for me. Okay, and so I love that about that. But going to and being part of the John Maxwell, what I learned things about like what listening really means, which is, am I ready to say my piece before you're done talking? Because then that means I'm not listening. There are all these golden nuggets that have totally been foundational to who I am as an individual, and I've allowed to really seep into how my worldview, and it just gives you a framework of how to be a super successful leader. And again, going back to the not only duplicating but scaling. When you're scaling an organization, that's the management piece, the business piece, but the leadership piece is how do you grow the people? And I've got scale for both those things. I'm so grateful for my time with John Maxwell.
Well, even though he writes at a 4th grade level, like you said, he's probably the world's greatest guru or expert on the topic of leadership coaching, and development.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I know he defines leadership. What is leadership?
So John, and it's my version 2 now, right? Because I've taken on, but John Maxwell says that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And I think so many times, people think that I have to have a big fancy title, or I got to have a whole bunch of people that are direct reports to me. And that's just simply not true. It's just simply not true. Frank, Glenn, and Jackie, my siblings, they're leaders. I just 2 days ago was up in the mountains and we had dinner together, and I'm just hearing the story, and their friend Jack came along. And I'm watching the interactions between their friends, and I was able to speak life into my siblings of saying, you're a leader, you're a champion, you're going to change the world because you have influence in your friends' lives. And their perspective, Charlie, is going to change the world. I know that to be true.
That's great. So other than these leaders who you're talking about now, who are some leaders who you admire and why? What do you think makes him or her a great leader?
Yeah, well, listen, I'll probably talk about him a couple of times, I'm sure, on this podcast, but Coach, Stacy McCormick. There's a couple of things I always look for whenever I go and interact with companies. When I look in the parking lot, and I look at the type of cars that are in the parking lot, because everyone says they've got a great pay structure and commission plan and this, that, the other. And you can kind of see that in what people drive. I got to tell you, we got some of the nicest looking cars in our parking lot, okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing is Stacy's married to the same gal for a very long time. By the way, so are you, and so is Manny. It's one thing that I don't know if I ever shared that with you, but it was really important to me to be under leaders and under men and women that have the results that I'm looking for in my personal life too.
Got it. Okay. Well. So he's a great leader. Who else?
So another one, someone that is not part of the river, but a guy named Redford Most. And Redford is...
I've met Redford.
You've met Red.
I've met Redford.
Yes. When we were up at the Purpose Summit, this guy shows up with a bus. He's the 70-year-old version of me. I proudly wear that badge. I do. And Redford sees the impossible as the normal thing to do. He makes any situation better. Totally, is a thermostat, meaning when he walks in the room, the energy changes, everyone gets happier, and there's more clarity, and people actually see themselves for the first time and get words for how awesome they are. That's what impact someone has on someone's life. And that's something that I just absolutely love about Red.
Is Red his first name, real name?
There's a story behind that, but legally it now is Redford Most. Yeah.
Redford Moss.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the thermostat. And,
Yeah.
and so what is the saying about the thermostat versus the thermometer? What's the difference?
Yeah. So the
And
difference is
what do you want to be?
good. So the thermometer, if we had a thermometer right here, it could tell us the temperature in the room. Okay. And that's pretty much all it does. But if we had like a thermostat next to it, what does a thermostat do? It actually can change the environment. And because now we all feel we could pump it up to 80 degrees or 40 degrees, and we would experience that atmosphere. And as a leader and as an individual, you got to kind of ask yourself, like, am I just like reading the temperature in the room, right? Or am I able to impact that?
Yeah.
And is that impact going in the direction that I want it to go? Is it making people say and think, wow, I really want to be around that person?
That goes back to influence.
That's right.
Yeah. And any critic can just read the temperature and read the news.
That's right.
Were there any other leaders that you wanted to call out who you admire?
Another leader is Dusty Hammock. All right. So Dusty, shortly after, and you guys really encouraged me on this, is during the interview process, I said, hey guys, listen, I've got this trip planned.
I remember this.
It's a 10-day backpacking trip in the Rockies of 54, or it ended up being 47 miles. And it's like 3 weeks after I start. What do we want to do with that?
Sure, take 2 weeks. A lot of people work 3 weeks, take 2 weeks off. We actually did not want you to miss your bucket list trip.
Yeah. And what this trip is, and Dusty is one of the leaders of it, is it's a leadership course, and it's an outdoor leadership course where you actually experience and increase your tolerance for uncertainty and adversity, and the stories that came from there of survival, of skill set, and growing and stretching myself personally, because I believe that all growing happens outside of your comfort zone, not inside. And so I took and put myself outside of my comfort zone. You guys allowed that to happen, and I believe that I came back an even better leader and person, and by the way, husband and father.
That's great.
Than I ever was before.
Okay, Carl, do you think that leaders are born or made?
I believe that every person is born with a God-given destiny. And I do believe that the majority of people plan their family vacation more than they do their own life. And so with that said, to answer the question, I think it might be both.
Okay.
And
nature and nurture.
Nature and nurture.
And I think it's a skill that can be developed.
And when I say I think, I
it.
believe.
Yeah.
I believe that it's both.
Okay.
And that's the power of going back to the thermostat of who are we around, right? And I talked about Danny McDaniel. He also, he taught me the place to go, the people you meet, and the books that you read. Like, let's stop and think about that for a moment. Like, what are the 3 closest people in our life? I think Jim Rohn or Zig Ziglar had said it too. It's like, if you want to increase your income, look at the average income of the 5 closest people in your life. And that's probably where you're at, right? Yeah. Some of us need to change the pond that we're fishing out of.
Yeah, I recently read you're going to be the average of your 12 closest friends and colleagues.
Now it's 12? That's good.
I did read 12 the other day.
Good.
I've heard 5 the most.
Yeah.
Well, when you're hiring a leader of any kind, whether it's for a store, a district, a region, what have you, what do you look for in that person?
Yeah. I think that there's 2 things. Is this the right person, and is this position that they're applying for the right seat? And what I mean by that is the right people. Like, I look at our core values, and again, when we're interviewing people, it's an hour or it's a short period of snapshot of time, and I look at our core values and I think, does this person do I believe that this person always exemplifies our core value most of the time, or maybe not most of the time? And if the answer is more often than not right there, I'm like, okay, that person's the right person. Then when I think about the right seat, do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity to do the job? And what I mean by get it, do they understand the ins and outs of the actual position? Maybe it's their experience, maybe it's not their experience, but do they understand and can comprehend the specific nature of the job? The next thing is, wants it. Do they have the God-given, like just the fire breathing in their belly, to go and just tackle the challenge and the capacity? Can they get tasks done so long as they can get them done in a timely manner? Yeah. And so I ask questions around that to really reveal and get a sense of where they're at in those two areas.
Well, it sounds like part of what you're talking about is don't be rudderless and don't just run fast aimlessly.
That's right.
You really, and you've talked about it in your own journey and then what you look for in others. Has someone had done that self-reflection to assess which direction they need to go, where their gaps are, what skills they need to nurture and develop? So I think that's really great. In terms of how it applies to this whole topic of leadership.
Yeah. You're spot on.
So what do you think is the difference between management and leadership?
Yeah, leadership's about the people. We say that everything rises and falls on leadership. This is the vision type of an individual. Mm-hmm. So this is that individual and who is able to take the vision of where they want to go and get it shared by all of everyone in their organization. They're creative, they're open-ended. These are the optimistic people, right? Mm-hmm. And the management aspect there it's really about the business. So managing the day-to-day. If the leadership people are the visionaries, the management aspect are the doers. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the difference between the two. But I do believe that any position in a company where you have a direct report, you got to lead, you got to manage, and it's the trifecta is accountability. Mm-hmm. And that's really the byproduct of doing leadership well in that position mm-hmm. and management. So not only casting that vision and getting people to rally around it, mm-hmm. but also, and making it clear, but also actually getting the business and getting the work done. So those two combined equal accountability. And it's not this hammer and a nail kind of philosophy where if you don't get it done, they're done.
I like the way you framed that up. I've also heard it said, you lead people, which you talked about leading people, you manage things.
Yes.
And you talked about managing the business, you manage the processes. I just like the way you tied, both of them are useful, and then to infuse that accountability piece into it. Okay. All right. Switching gears from leadership, that was a great discussion. We're also looking to develop and or to hire top producers. What do you think makes someone a top performer in sales in our industry?
Yeah. I think there's a couple things. The first thing is curiosity, because I think people have to keep asking questions. If we've arrived, we're never going to be able to really fully get there mm-hmm. because when do you really fully arrive? You don't. There's a constant and never-ending improvement. The next thing is fun, right? Playfulness, right? They've got to have a sense of humor, because honestly, with what we do in our industry and really with a lot of industries, but just in life in general, is it can get tough sometimes.
You think playfulness is one of the top ones, huh?
I think that ability to have a sense of humor and levity in times where it's super stressful is extremely important.
Okay.
And then I think also too, mental and emotional reliability. And what I mean by that, it's kind of like a paradox, right? So I think there's going to be things that are unpredictable that happen, and our ability to be flexible in it, but also firm in some situations. We have to have that flexibility. It's kind of like make a plan, but don't plan on it type of mentality.
Pliable. You said reliability, but you meant flexibility.
That's correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And is there another one?
Yes. Like, have you ever listened to Les Brown? And he's got you gotta be hungry. There's gotta be
hungry.
That's right. I
remember he tells the story of his. I'm sorry if that was too much for the podcast. No, carry away with some Les Brown. About how he took over. Can you do his call?
I wish I could, man, and that would have been awesome if I had that line down right there. But I will tell you this: we got to put that. We got to find a YouTube link of that and throw that in the notes for people, because they got to see it.
Brown and the additional resources here in the show notes.
Yes.
Okay, got it. So curiosity, playfulness, mental and emotional flexibility or pliability, adaptability, and you got to be hungry.
You got to be hungry.
Yeah, you got to have that hunger. Okay. We are also looking for great talent to run our stores. What do you think makes someone a top performing general manager or store leader, having been one yourself? That took a store from 7 to 14 million.
Yeah. And so, well, When I reflect back on on this question, I have never met a single person that dreamed of selling furniture and mattresses when they were in the second grade.
Really?
I've never met. Have you?
No, I have not.
See, exactly. And so it's kind of funny. It's like, oh, I'm in furniture, and people are like, in this day and age where it's so purpose driven, like you just see people's look, be like, okay, that's cool. All right, yeah, good. But no one dreams of doing that. But what people do dream of is having a life of significance and influence. And so, some of those things, the attributes there are it's confident and humble. It's driven and healthy. It's flexible and firm, and there's so many paradoxes there. And you guys, we went to the why am I skipping on the Global Leadership Summit? Thank you. And with Craig Rochelle, his opening talk was on these paradoxes. And that's the thing, that it's never just all in one side or the other. The best leaders live in the extremes. And that's what we really look for. And that really, to me, speaks a lot to that leader, because sometimes on interviews, you'll hear people say, well, I'm all this, and this. And you don't hear any of the other side. I'm all confident, but there's no humility on the other side. And so when you think about our people in our organization, you got to think about what would the impact of someone who is just on one side, right? And let's say confident and humble, for example, who's just always confident. That might come off as someone really hard to connect with. And then who are they leading? They're leading nobody. They're going on a walk. They're leading themselves. And on the humble side is we need assertiveness in our organization, because we have to have these easy, productive conversations that produce such good fruit. But if we're too, and essentially the opposite, not the opposite, but the negative side of that is passive. We've got to have that urgency and that balance to understand. And so that's where I say leadership lives in those extremes, in those paradoxes. Yeah. And that's what I really look for in a well-rounded GM.
You look for the dichotomy and the spectrum. Can they be both, humble and have humility and be confident?
Yeah.
Or optimistic.
And realistic. That's right.
Or focused, firm, as you called it, or flexible, adaptable.
That's right.
So, okay. Lastly, what do you think makes someone a premier multi-unit leader, or said another way, a leader of leaders?
A leader of team of teams, right?
Yeah, team of teams. That's from the book.
And, I would say everything I've already talked about as far as, even in our sales team, right? The curiosity, the playfulness, the fun part of that, the mental and emotional resiliency, then the paradoxes. I think it's all of that with more life experience, because their comfort zone of a multi-unit leader needs to be bigger than the people they are leading, because they are going to be the ones that are going to be required to handle and hold more responsibility. And so if their comfort zone, that the people that are leading are the size of like one of the pieces of paper here, like our multi-unit leaders have to have the size of the table here. They have to have more, stability to what they're doing.
So what do you do, Carl, when you have this super talented all-star who's like running laps around everyone else, has minimal life experience, but super driven, super ambitious. And if you don't promote this person, you're going to lose them. But the life experience doesn't meet that criteria that you just talked about.
Yeah. And, Steve King told me this. And Steve King was, one of the leaders in my life who actually gave me the shot, because I was that guy.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's where you're going with it, but I was that guy.
No, I was just trying to respond to your description.
And that's the part of my life and my story that's wide open, right? I love being the first one that's wrong, admitting it to it, right? I don't like being wrong, but I'll own it first and foremost, and then I'll do everything I can to fix it. But I was that guy. I was the young guy getting all the results, right? And I said it, earlier, is that when I got more stores, that's where the wheels started falling off. But Steve King, when I came into the Ashley Furniture world in Chicago, Steve was one of the ones that hired me. He said, one of the first questions out of my mouth was, how long do I have to be a GM? I want to be a multi-unit. I want to, this, that. And he saw that hungry, but that was the one side of it. And what he said to me, I was driving in his car, and he said, you know what, Carl, listen, there are just certain things that time and position can only teach you. And I think you're amazing. I think you're great. But, I've never promoted someone to a multi-unit leadership in under 9 months. It might have been 12, but I probably heard like 9 or something like that, and what ended up happening was that easy and productive conversation he had with me set the expectation and foundation, and it made me trust him even more because he gave me the pause.
Yeah.
But going back to that question, if we have those people in our organization, my expectation is our multi-unit leaders are having that conversation with that person. They're already aware of it.
Yeah.
And I've identified those areas with X to Y by when on how to progress and get better.
Well, speaking of going from X to Y, let's in career pathing.
Yeah.
You've been in the industry for a long time now. And what is unique about our approach to career paths and titles or identities at what's referred to as the traditional retail sales associate, the RSA level? What's unique with our version of it?
I've in my travels across the country, in my career and working with multiple furniture retailers, what we do really great at the River is we have designations not for performance and essentially time and position, right? Mm-hmm. So we and tied to each one of those levels in our organization, which we begin in the sales organization as an HFA, Home Furnishings Associate. So this is our entry-level sales position, okay? Some folks would call that an RSA, right? Retail Sales Associate. But, once they achieve a certain performance level and a couple different metrics to make sure it's all healthy, not just this one area, right? A solid three-legged stool, if you will. Then they get promoted to the HFC level, Home Furnishings Consultant, Home Furnishings Professional, Home Furnishings Experts. And every step along the way, the standard gets bigger, right? The responsibility is greater, but also so is the commission and payouts.
Yeah. Well,
and the incentive, right? And that's we honor our people.
Okay.
There's not a lot of organizations that they just say, okay, sales, yeah, go do your thing, but we honor their career path. And we're so thankful that they've been here for so long. I mean, we're celebrating 10-year anniversaries all the time. We just, recently celebrated Mason Wilson's 10-year anniversary. We love that guy. We love all of our 10 years. But, Dwayne Baker at the university, I mean, this guy has just been with us and has been steady source. And he's also been on the podcast, right? If you go check out it, can we link to his pod? Because it's awesome. He's just fantastic.
We sure can. We sure can. Okay, Carl. This conversation it's just gaining steam. I think what we're going to do is we've gone through leadership and just the retail performance and Mr. Mo and all those fun things that you're working on. I think let's press pause on it. Will you come back next week?
Let's do it.
And let's know more about you and what makes you tick and who some of the unsung heroes and how you're thriving and what some of your tips and tricks and advice are. How's that sound?
Sounds great, Charlie. Let's do it.
Okay. So that's been the Stories from the River, the Carl Hillesland episode, part 1. Listen wherever you catch your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon. Mash that like button. Or send us a comment. Tell us how we can get better. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Or if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. We'd love to grow our subscriber count. That's how we grow the podcast. And send us some feedback. Or hey, like this episode. I know I will.
Yeah.
This one is straight fire. Straight fire with Carl Hillesland. And come back next week and join us. Carl, we'll see Carl next week.
Let's do it.
Awesome.